Well, the federal election is in high gear, and so is the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our 2015 federal candidate interviews with those individuals seeking to be the Member of Parliament for either Cambridge or the new federal riding of Kitchener South Hespeler. And it's a real pleasure today to sit down with the only independent candidate, Lee Sperduti. How are you, sir?
Good to meet you. Good, thank you.
Cambridge has got an independent candidate.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm hoping that my ideas will resonate with some people, and I'm just a blue-collar worker with blue-collar ideals, and I think we can really make some change with that.
You know what I think is interesting is that, and everybody, most people, unless you're a card-carrying party faithful, you're really an independent. You know, you may have leaned a certain way throughout your life. I know some people who changed when they were young, they were one way, and now they're older, they're another way. But what's really interesting is we're all predominantly independents, and we're just looking for a path that speaks to, our interests.
Our own ideals, yeah.
Yeah. So what caused Lee Sperduti to say, I'm going to run in a federal election, I'm going to have no support from a national or federal party behind me, I'm going to do this all on my own?
I think that the biggest thing for me is that I've always voted based on platform. I've never voted for a specific party or a specific
Yeah, that's okay.
a specific ideal. So I think that this might resonate with the people in Cambridge. Another thing for me is that I don't really see anybody that I would actually vote for this time around.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people said, you know what, you're crazy for throwing your hat in the ring, but like I said, I'm a blue-collar worker, and I believe in blue-collar ideals, and I believe that if we have the opportunity to take pieces of each party's platform,
Mm-hmm.
the good pieces, which they all have a good piece of their platform, and dovetail them together, it'll be the best policy for all Canadians.
Yeah, and I don't think you'd find too much disagreement with that. I think, I watched the last debate, for example, and I thought, there's got to be a lot of people out there watching that debate who says, gee, I like what he says, and I like what he said, and I like what he said. And, if we could just find some harmony, and, a lot of it relates to a question we'll talk about later that you'll probably have a lot of input in, and when we talk about electoral reform.
Right.
First of all, let's get right into it. I'm going to ask you the same questions, more or less, that I asked the regular party candidates, but it's going to be a little bit of a twist because, it's going to be quite different for you, and this is going to be Lee Sperduti's answer, not
the political answer.
One of the political answers. So
Right.
It's going to be very... 2008, 2009, we both know it was the worst economic time since the Great Depression. That was largely the responsibility of the housing market in the U.S., which really started to collapse around itself and its people. And consumers lost confidence. And when consumers lose confidence, they don't buy cars. So all of a sudden the auto industry, collapsed. And then it became that global problem because, mortgages in the U.S. were held partially in Europe and all over the place. And so everybody felt that problem. We were relatively safe in the aspect that we were kind of guarded from a financial institution perspective, so we didn't see the collapse in the housing market. However, it certainly was traumatic for us because our largest trading partner, the U.S., was having, terrible thousands of hundreds of millions of people out of work. This recession, or technical recession, is oil and gas. It's totally different from the last. It doesn't have any relationship whatsoever. You would probably agree with me that consumer confidence is still up. People are still buying things. Now, I know dealerships in town who have sold more cars in the last month than they've ever sold in the history of being here. So this is a different type of recession. May last longer because it's about oil and gas pricing and how everybody else around the world handles it. As an independent going there, and if you were sitting there as a member of parliament, how would you be recommending to the government, albeit only one voice, but you would have input as an independent, how would you be recommending to the federal government of the day how they should be handling and going forward to tackle this technical recession?
So I think the biggest issue with this recession is we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves and made ourselves this oil and gas dependent economy, and I think that's got to change. I mean, we really do have to focus on smaller business, like mom and pop shops, small restaurants, the communities, and to do that, I think we really have to actually help them grow their business through cheaper loans or the opportunity to get grant money to expand their business and actually hire more employees. If we can get away from this oil and gas, I mean, it should be part of our economy, but it shouldn't be the central point of our economy. If we can get away from that, I think we'll do much better.
Well, I think, and it's interesting. We see technologies kind of taking us down that path. And there's always that argument, like, do you shut the spigot off right now and just say no? We're gonna, advance in this way or away from fossil fuels, or, do we do that through encouraging technology developments around alternative energy solutions and allow the spigot just to dry up by itself? So I think that's more or less what you've been telling me. We need to divert some of our attention over this way. Let oil and gas lie where it may.
Well, I mean, you don't want it to die off completely. The best and most important thing is to understand is that we have to take every piece of the economy and let it dovetail together to be the best economy. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we just don't want to focus on automotive or oil and gas or whatever other opportunities are out there. The biggest thing for us to do is to make sure that every piece of the economy has a chance to be successful.
I think not unlike the, and I'm having a little bit more fun with you than I had with the other candidates because you're independent. I think, the difference here is both recessions, if in fact we're in a recession, and I would argue we're not, but that's fine. Both recessions really were driven by external problems. Our oil and gas, we don't set the rate of our oil and gas, that's set internationally. The housing market, again, in the U.S. there's really nothing the federal government of Canada could do about either one of them. It is what it is, but what the federal government can do is attack some solutions. And what you're saying is, look, oil and gas is down, there's nothing we can do about it. Let's start propping up this other side of the equation.
That's right. I mean, at the end of the day, if the small businesses in our communities, which they hold a significant amount of employees and even residual spending power on those employees. I mean, if you're supporting them, those employees can now go out and they can go purchase the things that they need, whether it be an automotive, a car, whether it be a house. It's very important to support them as well. So at the end of the day, if we're looking at the oil and gas, and we've lost a lot of jobs there, and it's unfortunate, but we have to be able to get those people who have lost their jobs there into another job, and then that means we have to prop up the smaller businesses.
No, I would agree with you. It's no surprise to business, that our world economy has maybe technically slipped a little bit. I think business would probably tell you or anyone else that really since the last recession, we've been chugging along. We haven't been bustling along. And the government's dramatically increased our trade deals. There's no question about that in the last 4 years. The big one is the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement with the European Union. We also have the South Korean trade agreement. But part of the problem is when you look at the European trade agreement, they're not in great economic shape either. They're probably not looking to buy as much as we'd want them to buy. The other problems is we have interprovincial trade barriers, and you obviously know about some of those. I use my favorite example is if you had a winery in Niagara, you couldn't sell wine in BC because the people in Kelowna get all upset. Those barriers if we can trade freely with the United States, with other countries around the world, we should be able to trade freely with Canadians. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's kind of in the provincial jurisdiction, but I would say that the more red tape we can eliminate, whether it's a trade barrier, whether it's some kind of a tariff or tax, whatever they do, especially for cross provincial borders trade. If we can eliminate that and make it easier for somebody from Quebec even to import their wine to Ontario and vice versa, you're doing better for the whole economy. So at the end of the day, if as hopefully a member of Parliament, we could sit down and actually help the provinces come to agreements with this interprovincial trade. I think it's a benefit to everybody. It's a benefit to all Canadians.
Good, good, very good. Another issue that's faced small businesses is skilled trades, and you said you're a blue-collar worker. You understand clearly what a skilled tradesperson is. There's no question. Governments love to feed the system with educational opportunities, and they're important for retraining or individuals who want to become a plumber or electrician. I think that's good and that's honorable. But the problem is, when a business needs a skilled tradesperson, they need them today. We need welders. We need steel fabricators. We need truck drivers. And a lot of people say to me, well, truck drivers aren't skilled tradespeople. And I tell them, well, going back a 45-foot trailer up to a loading dock,
Right.
You'll find out how skilled you have to be very, very quickly. So we need these people, but our temporary foreign worker program isn't working. All because, some fast food restaurant in Saskatchewan decided to underpay illegal immigrants. We really need immigrants. This whole country was built on immigrants. We've talked about this for 15 or 20 years. We're going to be at a situation where immigrants are going to have to fill some of these spots, yet we've largely done not much about it. The immigrants coming in aren't matched to specific job openings that are there. What's your feeling on the temporary foreign worker program, the immigration issue, and how would you recommend to government how business could access the talent they need today, whether they're Canadians or whether they're from anywhere else in the world?
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. This is something that actually touches a chord with me. My family came here in 1956 from Italy, pretty much with nothing, with hopes of a better life. My grandfather was an electrician in Italy. He wasn't allowed to practice as an electrician here and ended up being a janitor for over 30 years at a high school. He made do with what he had, and I'm proud of him for doing that. But the fact is we've got a lot of people in Canada, new immigrants in Canada, who have accredited university degrees from their own home country, and we don't recognize that here. Mm-hmm. So I think a big part of that, and this specifically with even just something to take an example, is the doctors. You have people who have gone to school for several years. They now have actually worked in that profession in their home country, and they come to Canada with the hopes of being a doctor, and they don't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So I think that the best thing that we can do is that we have to streamline the process for them to be allowed to be certified to Canadian standards and to actually become part of Canadian society. Mm-hmm. It makes it easier when you have a job that you're good at and you want to go to work for this country. Mm-hmm. So I think what we should look at is when you have a skilled worker, whether it's a doctor, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a skilled tradesperson who's a pipe fitter, what we have to do is make it get rid of the red tape, allow them to take a 1-year level up program to Canadian standards, take a series of exams. Once they pass those exams, they have the opportunity now to join the workforce at a higher paying job, and are giving back to the community just through their spending power. I mean, it's something as simple as that. Now, with regards to getting workers here that we need, that we can't fill those positions with our own people, I think we have to look at making sure that the jobs that are available and open here are filled with Canadians who live and reside in Canada first. But if the opportunity is not there for those workers, I think we need to bring people from through a temporary foreign workers program, have them come into Canada and work in those jobs. I mean, those corporations, those companies, those small businesses need those workers to operate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the easiest thing to do there is that when you bring a temporary foreign worker into the country, there has to be a guarantee in place from that corporation that you're going to pay them fairly, not undercut the system and the process. But eliminating the red tape and maybe shortening the time and the time frame and the amount of work that has to go into getting that worker here and maybe the application process is the best thing to do. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not filling a job, you're losing money, and you're losing money as a government from that residual income from taxes. So let's help these people get here if we need them, and let's make sure that they become a viable part of our Canadian society.
Yeah, very good. No, I wouldn't disagree with you one bit. I think it's about speeding up that process, and that's really been the challenge, and it's arduous. And when you got a small business owner, who's working half of his day out in the shop, and the other half of his day in the office balancing the paperwork and all of that, then to load him up with other red tape and paperwork seems just onerous.
It's almost impossible.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Doing business in Ontario is extremely expensive. Hydro costs are soaring. Electricity rates are going up by another 13% in the next 3 to 5 years. There's talk about a carbon tax or a cap and trade system coming into the province of Ontario. Call it carbon or cap and trade, but it's a carbon tax. There's no question about it. The Ontario Retirement Pension Plan is coming into place. That's going to add 2% to payroll tax. It's going to reduce workers' income by 2%. A lot of people say that that's a tax, and other people will argue, well, it's not a tax, that it's going into savings. Yes, it's going into savings, but nobody gets to see it unless they're lucky enough to retire. So even though it's out of the jurisdiction of the federal government, do you believe that the federal government has a role in dealing with provinces and some of the implementation that they're putting onto business or onto anyone for that matter, and saying, you know, we should support it or shouldn't support it, or it needs to be crafted in a certain way? What are your thoughts on all of that?
So to say that cap and trade is the best option to green our infrastructure and to green our manufacturing processes, it may not necessarily be the best option. I believe if you're going to force employers or of manufacturing corporations to pay these taxes, to have a cap and trade system, you have to give them an opportunity for an out on that system as well. It can't just be about making all that money. The real reason behind these taxes are supposed to be to reduce emissions, and really does it do that? We don't know until it gets enforced. So what I would suggest, I mean, if the provinces are gonna say that this is what has to happen, we have to be able to help the manufacturers pay for the changes that they need to make, and we also have to give them a sort of out with regards to if they green their processes, we give them a grant. If they're able to curb their emissions, we give them a grant. I mean, we have to be able to help them pay for this, because at the end of the day, if we make Ontario, which is already one of the highest cost jurisdictions to produce anything, if you make it that much more expensive, we're going to lose our jobs.
Yeah.
And we're so integrated with regards to manufacturing and small business and residual jobs from manufacturing, especially in this community. We really have to make sure that we take care of our the big corporations as well as the small corporations.
Yeah, well, largely, the small businesses are feeders. They're tier 1, tier 2, tier
That's
3
right.
suppliers to those big corporations. We need the big corporations. I think what's interesting is on the debate the other night, I think it was Mr. Mulcair made the mention about losing 400,000 manufacturing jobs across the country, and you know that the current government's done nothing to bring that back. 300,000 of those 400,000 jobs were in Ontario.
Yeah.
A lot of them in our area. You know, it'd be wonderful to be able to blame the federal government for that, but largely it's the provincial government that's to blame for that. The high electricity costs, some of the other things that they've tried to do that have scared investment away. How much? I know, constitutionally and through Confederation, and we give provinces all these, rights and privileges and kind of their own key to the vault, so to speak. But really, the national government, the government that's responsible for the security of our nation, both financially and from harm, shouldn't they have some control over what these territories and provinces are doing?
Well, with regards to employment, I mean, it's a big thing for the federal government to look at, making sure that if there is, we're giving money to the provinces, that the provinces are using the money in the right way. They're not just, whether it's banking it away or they're using it for their own self-interest through whatever party's in power. I think that we have to take some caution as a federal government and say, if we're going to give you transfer payments, if we're going to give you the opportunity to operate as a corporation, essentially, as a province, you really have to take heed and understand that you've got to work within certain rules. And right now, maybe there's a little bit more room to play with that and make sure that they get on board, the provinces get on board with that. I mean, they'll be willing to get on board if you say where the money stops. And it doesn't have to be that drastic, but I mean, it's time to sit down and negotiate and make sure that our money as consumers and our tax money is going to the proper infrastructure and the proper plan to create jobs in Canada.
Yeah, and I think, there needs to be some harmonization with the thought process of, are we doing something to hurt jobs or help create jobs? And recognizing that there has to be, there has to be some tax in place. There has to be, the government needs to get its money from somewhere. But I think, responsible delegation of those taxes and those costs have to be a blended between the provinces and the federal government. Cost of government is out of control. No one can refute that. 42% of our income goes to taxes. Almost half of your daily wage goes to other levels of government for them to spend. And I always say, and they haven't earned a nickel of it. Taxes, or household income has risen about 500% over the last 50 years. Taxes have risen 1,800% in that same period of time. So you don't even need to be a math wizard to put that on a graph to figure out, at some point down the road, those two lines are going to meet. The government's need or want or desire to spend money is going to outperform our ability to provide the money. What would you do? What recommendations would you bring forward to reduce the cost of government?
I mean, there's several different things to do. We could sit there and we can debate it all day, but the fact is we need to streamline our government. There's a lot of red tape. If you eliminate the red tape, you're also eliminating some cost. So I think, especially for small business, when where they're trying to get grant money, where they're trying to get procurement for federal contracts, I mean, the red tape is ridiculous, and we do have to eliminate that. Yeah. I just think that if we can all get together, and we can, no matter what party you belong to, if you're an independent, a liberal, conservative, NDP, that if we could sit down and say, you know what, this is how easy it is to streamline it, and it's very simple. We make those changes, we're saving money just doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's other opportunities, but I think that's one of the biggest things. You eliminate red tape, you're eliminating extra cost.
I think, everybody going into government, from the party perspective, when they want to win, their big tamale is, we're going to reduce the cost of government, we're going to find efficiencies, and none of them seem to do it when they get there. I've always blamed the bureaucracy for that, because the bureaucracy's worried when that party comes in that they're going to lose their jobs. So they do everything to keep the politicians as busy as possible so they forget about that. But at some point, that has to happen. People say to me, well, Greg, business isn't perfect either. And I say, yeah, you're right. There are a lot of big businesses that are filled with bureaucracy and waste a lot of money. But you know what? They're not taking tax money. If they're not efficient, that's costing them. It's not costing me. When government's inefficient, it's costing me.
Another thing to look at, just as a simple cost, the amount of money that an MP brings in as a wage is extremely significant. It's a large amount of money. And I'm a firm believer that if the medium wage here, as an example in Cambridge, is about $48,000, why would an MP be making 4 times that amount of money? That's not fair. So I think that the first step actually is, if you're going to talk about reducing costs, the MPs have to actually look at their own bank accounts and their own wage and say, you know what, my own constituents don't make anywhere close to this amount of money. It's time for us to reduce the cost to the government and to the people that we represent, and maybe take a hit on their paycheck. At the end of the day, that's who we're representing, is the people that voted us in and not the party ideal. And I think that if we can sit there and make those changes, I mean, that's a big change, and that's a lot of cost savings.
Exactly. Scandals have been a highlight of every government. Doesn't matter. You've been around long enough to see scandal after scandal after scandal, and it's not particular to any one party. Today we see Duffy and Wallen and Brazeau in the media all the time, largely because there's an election on, and there happens to be a conservative government in power. So why not, throw them to the wolves? But, the Liberals have had their scandals in the past. In fact, there are some Liberal senators that are being investigated right now. The NDP don't have any senators, but their MPs' expenses have come into question of late to the tune of about $2.7 million. The NDP government says, let's get rid of the Senate. Mr. Harper says that'd be a great idea, except we can't, so I'd rather see an elected Senate. And Mr. Trudeau says he's going to sit down in a room with everybody and come up with a way to make the Senate more responsible and maybe more effective and more efficient. What on earth would an independent have to say about the Canadian Senate?
The Canadian Senate's been part of our government for going back to our first days as a country, and it represented the Queen. That was the purpose of that group, was to represent that part of our culture and our heritage. But at the end of the day, I think what we should do is put term limits on senators. It doesn't mean we're eliminating senators, but we're eliminating the opportunity for them to become career politicians, and you're getting eliminating the chance for them to be enticed by the different lobbyists and that kind of thing. So if we can do that, I think that's a good first step. Another thing is that why do senators, and they don't have to be, why are all the senators from parties? They do not have to be under our own laws.
No.
A senator can be somebody who is taken out of a community and be put in a place there to represent their community and Canadians. So, I mean, we have to get away from this whole party game. It seems to be, my team versus your team, Conservative versus Liberal.
Yeah.
It's about time that we all got together, become Team Canada, work together, and put the things forward that we all need to see.
Well, it's funny, somebody said to me, who obviously didn't know how the system works, and says, well, yeah, Greg, how come there is no NDP senators? Well, they've never been the government. And largely, Senate appointments are, people who have been faithful to the party. So up until Mr. Harper was elected as Prime Minister, the Senate was largely Liberals. In fact, it was dominated by Liberals. And as they dropped off and left, Mr. Harper, of course, filled it with Conservatives. I think what's interesting, though, is he says he would like to see the provinces run elections for senators, probably when you do MPPs, and he would appoint them if they got elected. So that's not a guarantee. Guaranteed to get the position. If there's no vacancies, you're just going to sit in limbo until there is a vacancy. However, that would give the potential opportunity for independents, Greens, NDPs, whoever, if they got elected by their province, they certainly, if Mr. Harper says that he would appoint them, then we could potentially see that different framework. But I think they need to be responsible to somebody, and they don't seem to be responsible to anybody.
No, and that's part of the problem. I mean, they can spend as much money as they need to. You've seen some people spending money on things that have nothing to do really with the government.
I know.
And that's not fair because that's our tax dollars. So, I mean, they need to be held accountable. They need to be taken to task if they are taking advantage of the system. And it's not happening now. So, obviously, I'd have to do some more research into having the provinces elect those people. But I think that there's definitely a need for change there. And we can all agree on that there has to be some change there. It's a matter of figuring out which the best option is to have that reform. And just to say we're going to do one thing doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option. There may be a couple different options that we need to put together to make that
I think
change.
if it's supposed to be the chamber of sober second thought, it should be. And it should be responsible and reasonable, and it should be what it's described as. So hopefully, one of these days, maybe it'll happen. Electoral reform would be interesting for you. You're not part of a party. However, independents would collaborate together. I'm quite certain if there were 20 of you that got elected. You don't necessarily have to side with one another, but you probably would come together as a caucus yourself to discuss and describe the issues. Electoral reform is talked about oftentimes during elections. Doesn't matter what it is. We have the first past the post electoral reform that a lot of people are talking about. Mr. Mulcair said he would bring in proportional representation. Mr. Harper says, no, first past the post is the Westminster system, the British parliamentary system. That's what we have. That's what we're going to stay with. Mr. Trudeau says, no, he would put together an all-party committee. We would talk about electoral reform for one purpose and one purpose only, I think, from his perspective, because to some degree he is a traditionalist about Canadian Parliament. But I think what he's trying to do is engage voters. He looks at 57% in the last federal election. That's just not enough. Do we want to have a law that says you must vote or you're going to be fined or whatever? I don't think so. You and I would both prefer people to voluntarily want to go out and exercise their vote. However, people feel disenfranchised because people would feel sometimes if they're going to vote for an independent or a green that their vote doesn't count. Do you agree with proportional representation?
I think that proportional representation is the way of the future for our government. I mean, we really have to look at making that change. We're so disengaged as an electorate that we really, if you want young people to come to the polls and vote, We have to make it so that they understand what they're voting for and make them feel that they're being represented. And right now, with first past the post, people don't believe that they're being fairly represented. I mean, you look at the Conservative Party. I think they only got around 37%, something like that, in the last election of the total votes, but they still have a majority government, and I just don't think that that's fair.
I've often said that too. I can't stand it when the leader, it doesn't matter federal or provincial or whatever, but when the leader comes out and stands up and says, "Thank you very much, the people have given me a mandate." Well, when 37% of 57% vote, you know, you got a mandate from 18% of the population, of the eligible voters. That's not a mandate.
No.
And, you know, really, you shouldn't be out there saying, well, we're just going to do what we want because the people of Canada want us to do. I think the reality of it is we need some, you know, we need something to address that. And you know, I've often said I hate minority governments, and I would always say I hate minority governments traditionally because they've never gotten along, or gotten along very well. And you know, for years, Europe and all over the Middle East, they've, you know, had minority governments all along because they have a multi-party proportional representation. What was interesting, though, was in the last federal election in Israel, Netanyahu got an outright majority in a proportional representation jurisdiction. So it can happen. You know, somebody pointed that out to me that I was wrong in saying it will never have a majority, but you know what? I think maybe if the minorities get along, if the parties would get along and try and find out where they meet and agree, I think that's going to be better government in the end.
I think when you look at, like you said, approximately 18% of the electorate cause a majority government here, that should have been an eye-opener to the Conservative Party to say, you know what, we need to really engage our voters. And it's not just people that voted for them, but the people that didn't vote for them as well. And at 17%, you would say, you know what, we need to work harder to get things done, to make them want to even vote for us. And that's just not happening with the system.
No.
So clearly it has to change. And I mean, proportional representation is the only way. Another thing I'd like to say is that you made mention that maybe an independent vote or a green vote might be a lost vote. I disagree. I think times are changing, and I think that with the opportunity to negotiate with whatever party's in power, that we can actually bring positive change to Ottawa. So whether it's a vote for me or a vote another alternative, I think that whoever gets the seat from Cambridge has to look at not only the party ideal, but the ideals of the people that they're representing. So if that happens, then that's a good vote, and you've done a good job.
Yeah, I certainly don't, and I didn't want you to misunderstand me and think that I felt that a vote for an independent or a green is not a, you know, you've lost your vote. You haven't. You've participated in the democratic process in Canada. No vote is lost. No vote is not worth doing. I think that's the perception of people who don't vote, is they think, well, my vote's not going to count, and that's why they don't come out to the polls. But you know, getting people out to the polls, we had an electronic election in the last municipal election here. Quite frankly, I thought it was great. I think someday we'll see it at the provincial and the federal level, and that'll get more and more people, I think, as technology goes along. These young kids now, these millennials, want to vote on their device, and they should be able to.
When we look how disengaged the youth vote is, I mean, we're talking people between 18 and 24. A lot of them are away at university during the voting periods, and we're asking them to do mail-in votes. Well, can you honestly say that you know an 18-year-old who's put a stamp on an envelope and sent it in the mail?
Oh, no.
You've never seen that.
I don't think there's 18-year-olds who would know where to go and buy a stamp. Exactly.
So I think you're on the right track. We definitely have to change the way we vote. But I mean, times are changing. The young electorate is progressively wanting to get involved, but not really understanding the process or not liking the process. So let's make it easier for them to vote. And that will change a lot with the party structures as well.
Yeah,
So.
I agree. No, it's an exciting future if you're an 18-year-old, I'm sure. Finally, our campaign is Small Business Too Big to Ignore. We really believe that 98.2% of all employer businesses in Canada are under 100 employees. 2/3 of employed Canadians work for these businesses. And 80% of all new jobs created, historically, I don't know about going forward, but backwards, 80% of all those new jobs that have been created were created in businesses with under 100 employees. Small business is absolutely, no question about it, too big to ignore. It's the largest part of our economy. It's the most vibrant part, and I think the best bet of anybody, if you invest in small business, you've got an 80% chance of coming out of it with a win. What would an independent do going to Ottawa to stand there, probably in the back row somewhere, but yell and scream and holler out for the sake of small business?
You know, I was just downtown Galt today, and I was at Monogram
Oh, yeah.
Coffee. Great place.
coffee.
And I was talking to one of the owners, Monica, and I asked her that question because you know, I don't own a small business, so I mean the best thing to do is ask the people that have a business. And I said, you know what? What's the best option for you? What do you need from your federal government? And she said, you know what? We need money to grow. And whether it's a grant to expand a space, to buy new equipment, to even to do some kind of training for their employees. Right now, I believe they have 8 employees, and she says, you know what? We're growing. We have, the space is a certain size, and we need to make it bigger. Sometimes it's not an option to get a loan from a bank, a small business. Sometimes that's very hard, especially in the food industry. If we can offer a grant, and let's just take it as an example. I work at the Toyota plant, and I believe the investment that was made at the Toyota plant, the announcement just before the election was
Yep.
called, it's significant, and it's a lot of money. If you look at what came from the federal government in the form of a 0% interest loan, I believe it was around $50 million. I mean, if we were to take $10,000 per small business in Cambridge, we could give $10,000
Yeah.
to each one of those businesses and have money left over to operate and do something else with. I mean, you're giving a grant. I mean, there would be a process. They have to fill out the proper applications within the model of less
for
red
sure,
tape.
for sure.
But I mean, if they have an opportunity to invest that money, that means they're hiring new people. That means those people who are working in that workplace now have increased spending power, and it all filters back into the community anyway. The simplest thing, in my opinion, is if somebody needs to increase their productivity, to grow a space, to buy new equipment, is to offer them a grant.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you 100%. You can use this. I'm going to give you one that none of the parties want to use this, but an independent, you can use just about anything. So 80% of all new job creation comes from small business. So I relate it this way. If you were a gambler, and there's no question about it, if you're going into small business, it's a gamble. But if you were a gambler, and I took you into a casino and pointed to 2 machines, and I said, that machine is just your regular old slot machine. That machine, though, is guaranteed to pay off 80% of the time. Which slot machine are you going to go to?
Clearly, you go to the 80%.
Absolutely, and you're going to throw in as much money as you can because you know at the end of the day, you're going to win 80% of the time. And that's what we've been trying to say about small business. We need to have programs in place to help these small businesses like Monograms downtown, where they want to expand or grow or bring in some new equipment to do something new. We need to have programs in place to help them because you know what? It's not a big gamble.
No.
It's just not a big gamble. Lise Berduti, it's been a ton of fun talking to you. I want to give you the opportunity to talk to the Cambridge constituents, tell them why they should vote for you on or before October the 19th.
What I'd like to say as an independent candidate is that you have an opportunity to make change in Ottawa. If you decide to vote for me, and I'm given that mandate to represent Cambridge, I'll do it to the best of my ability. I'll make sure that I uphold the position with respect to the position, and I'm not going to waste your money. If you decide to vote for me, I hope that with your leadership, your stewardship, on October 19th, that we can bring positive change. So thank
Lee,
you very
it's
much.
been great. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
I know, Toyota's probably missing you over there, but too bad. We need you here.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, well, good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you very much.
Perfect.